I am so happy to be here. I'm excited to see everybody, and we're going to go through a lot regarding this subject right here, cross-cultural communication, but all the things that encompasses cross-cultural communication as well. I'll tell you a little bit about me, of course. Before I do that, I'll tell you about my style, right? Sometimes I read off of the slide for people that just love that, but I also like to interject, share stories, share different things, anecdotes, whatever, that I think is really important regarding this subject matter. And I probably will get off of this stage and might walk around a little bit. So that's a little bit about the technical me, and then I'll tell you a little bit more about my story. But before I do, how many of you are from, or how many of you live in Columbus? I'm just curious. Okay, fantastic. How many are from Ohio? Yeah, that's anybody not? Okay, can you shout out where you're from, where you live? Indiana? Kentucky? Michigan? Tennessee? Sorry, and I gotta say Kentucky that way. Well, my mom is from Alabama, but I'm originally from Toledo, Ohio. Most of the people here heard of it, but I live in North Dakota. Most people don't know Toledo, Ohio, when I'm there. So we live in North Dakota. I'll share more about me in a second. But the three objectives is we're going to identify what is cross-cultural communication, bless you. And then number two, we're going to illustrate why cross-cultural communication is important, why it's essential, especially in healthcare. And then number three, we're going to discuss we're going to share a little bit, hopefully we'll have time for discussion, about what's the first practical step that we could take to implement cross-cultural communication in the healthcare workplace. All right, so before I get to my story, I'm going to ask a couple more questions of you. How many of you are administrators in healthcare? Great. How in a nursing home? Great. Assisted living? Excellent. Retirement community in general? Okay, great. I guess they don't need it, right? No, I'm just kidding. How many people credentialed nursing, like as a nurse? Social work? Excellent. How about PT, OT, occupational therapy, physical therapy? Excellent. Fantastic. All right. You guys don't know anything about me, so you don't know I know a lot about each of those. So that's fantastic. And then the administrative one. So a little bit about me. I'm from Toledo, Ohio, and I grew up there, born and raised. And anybody from Toledo? I didn't ask that. Okay. Don't say no like that. She was like, no. Like, what's wrong with Toledo? Sandusky. Okay, Sandusky, Ohio. Yeah, Cedar Point. But yeah, I grew up that whole time in Toledo, Ohio, and have a lot of friends and family and everything in the Columbus area. What got me all into everything here and why I'm even here is because February 2020, I defended a dissertation, ready to continue the rest of the year like normal, right? And it wasn't like normal. The next month, most of you probably heard, right? Next month, March, I heard about older adults who were dying from social isolation and loneliness from a chaplain friend of mine who was telling me what was going on in his community where he was serving. And I just wanted to do something about that. I was telling Will that I told you I wasn't going to say it, but now since I told you about it, I'm going to tell them. Like, I started to do pass activities out to nursing homes and assisted living communities because I wanted to do something. My background was in creating curricula, helping underserved populations. So I did that. That was nice, but I wanted to do something more. So after that, create an intergenerational program. It's called To Legacy, and it connects university students in healthcare fields with older adults who may feel socially isolated or alone. And at the end of the sessions, we give to the older adult a legacy book that summarizes the stories that the older adults shared to reinforce that their story matters, they matter, and their story is one to be told forever. Do you agree with that? Yeah. So I did that. Got the attention of the University of North Dakota, and became a geriatric professor. Started to learn a lot more about the needs of older adults. And I mean, that's like 8 sessions. That's 8 other workshops. But I started to learn more about the needs of older adults, and then now health equity professor, and worked with numerous nursing homes and provided the intergenerational program for them. And so it's been really great, really productive, and that's a whole workshop. I give a workshop on social isolation and loneliness and solutions to it, and intergenerational connection and how important that is. So hopefully one day, invite me. I'd love to provide that. I haven't even started yet, so who knows if you're going to invite me or not. But all right, before I'm showing you a little glance of that, but I want you to tell me before I even show the next slide, what are some issues that are, and I know it's a big open-ended question, but what are some issues in your nursing home, in your assisted living community that you feel like maybe this is why you're here, what you want to address? Just give me any issues at all that's happening. You can shout it out, or you can raise your hand like formal. It's all good. Employee retention. That's a good one.
Allowing staff to see from that resident's point of view. The younger generation hasn't went through that particular aging process. So their approach to the geriatric population isn't sometimes received.
Yeah. You want to come up here and talk? No, I'm just kidding. But you're right. Helping each group have a different perspective, or at least value the perspectives of others with different backgrounds. Really good. I'm going to talk a lot about that. Any others? Yeah.
I'm also interested in the dynamics of different cultures amongst the staff and kind of building bridges and increasing cultural competence for staff at, the pay rate that they're at, to build those skills and knowledge to, I don't know,
Yes.
together instead of apart.
Yes. Amongst the cultural differences amongst staff. Because sometimes we forget about this, let's just be honest. Sometimes we forget about the staff. We want to focus on the clients or the residents or the patients, and sometimes the staff get overlooked, not intentionally, right? But thank you. That's a good point. So there's other issues. Some of you pointed out a couple of these issues: staff recruitment and retention, caregiver burnout, and that's professional or personal caregiver burnout, and dealing with that in one way or another. And then there is regulatory compliance. There's compliance of organizations. If any of you work in a nursing home, right? And then there's a lot of others, right? But what do all of these have in common, right? They're all communication issues. Those are all communication-related issues. And communication is a big deal, right? We're going to talk about communication before we're going to I'm going to talk about communication before we're going to cross-cultural communication. And how it affects one's health and well-being. Communication even affects one's hypertension, obesity, diabetes. It affects all of these results because communication goes across different spectrums, right? The spectrum with individually, as a group, and then also as an organization. And it would be amiss to dismiss one of those, right? They're all related. The thing that makes me passionate about social determinants of health is that it helps to unpack how things don't stay in a siloed box in real life, right? If there's economical instability, it can affect one's healthcare access, which can affect what they're eating, right? Their dietary habits. They don't just stay in pretty boxes, and it's the same with cross-cultural communication. So that's why I organized this the way I have. Also, social isolation and loneliness also affects one's health and well-being, right? How many of you attended a workshop on social isolation and loneliness before? This is your first mini one-slide workshop. This is great. All right. So social isolation and loneliness has negative health effects equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. The good news is this, that I was looking at, honestly, I think it was on TikTok or something. I'm not going to let this hit me. Sorry, I'm going to adjust this right now. But I was on TikTok, And I saw a video talking about if you grew up at this time, then you might remember this. So it actually said it showed something that I didn't even realize I forgot. I forgot there used to be smoking sections in restaurants. You know, like it hasn't existed, at least where I'm living, in so long that I really forgot there used to be a smoking. You had to tell the person which section you wanted to go into. That's crazy that I forgot that. Wouldn't it be nice if, I don't know, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, we could say something like, man, I almost forgot what it was like for people to experience this level of social isolation and loneliness. Because folks, when it came to nicotine, they attacked that issue, right? You remember the commercials? I remember the commercials, vivid commercials. And it caused an impact and a change. And I think that that's something that can happen with this epidemic of social isolation and loneliness. That's as much as I'll say about that issue of social isolation and loneliness. Also, Elsa was wrong. This is probably the most important part of this whole presentation. You guys don't have a sense of humor in this place. So you're like, I can't believe he showed Elsa. Well, you know what? I love my kids. And I'm going to represent them. I have 4 kids, all by myself. I gave birth to them. Just kidding. They're 2. I have a sense of humor, so you just gotta have to deal with that. So one is 4, the other one is 6, the other one is 8, and the other one is 10. And I love them. And I am not ashamed to talk to you about my kids, right? They really like this right here. And it's perfectly related. Now, if you love silos, then yeah, you're not going to like some things I say, because I'm going to talk about things and I'm going to point to how they're related, even though they don't look like they are. And that's, if you love silos, then you probably hate the social determinants of health because of what I just mentioned earlier. So she's wrong, right? We are not supposed to conceal, not feel. We're not supposed to do this because we have social, emotional, and cultural issues happening in our culture, in our society, but also in healthcare. And we can't keep it all in one condensed box. It's very important that we don't do that. Cross-cultural communication is the process of recognizing differences and similarities among cultural groups or individuals to more effectively engage within a given context. This is the purpose of cross-cultural communication, within a given context. Everything's in context. Also, developing strong cross-cultural communication skills is the first step in creating a successful work environment that brings out the best in all of people, but in all of an organization's team members. So this is the purpose of cross-cultural communication. And I am going to give some practical strategies, but we're going to really talk. I'm going to try to get really in the nitty-gritty of this whole thing. So we're going to go through these 3 areas. This is a synergy of cultural exchange. One is cultural self-awareness. The other one is cultural awareness of others. And then a nice part in the middle is cultural sensitivity. And that's the last part that we're going to go through together. Okay? But first one is cultural self-awareness. So cross-cultural communication starts from the inside, right? It's intra out, inside out. Why do I say this? Because what we practice with other individuals is actually the result of what we've been practicing individually with ourselves. So, for example, if we are quick to neglect our own needs, or if we don't listen to our own needs, if we're pushing and pushing and pushing, and which is a recipe for burnout, but if we're pushing and pushing and pushing and not listening to our own needs, we'll be less likely to listen to the needs of others because we're only practicing what we've been doing individually when no one's looking and watching, right? Everything in public is it's either you're pretending or it's a product of what we've actually been doing on our own. So it's important. Can't be neglected or ignored, right? So especially in healthcare, because of burnout, right? The recipe to decrease burnout is to be really good at being culturally self-aware. How about yourself? How about how you grew up and where you lived? the state. These things are important, right? How am I going to listen and value the culture of someone else if I don't really appreciate my own or pay attention to my own? And I'm not just talking about culture like I'm black. You know, I'm also talking about how I grew up, the things I love, the things I experienced, right? The things I've seen, the countries I've visited, all of these things. They're important, and they cannot be neglected. I cannot not mention it, if that makes sense, right? This is very important because it starts so much of how we communicate with others begins with how we interpret information and communicate with ourselves, right? How are we interpreting information? We're going to go through that here as well, right? And I don't care what society says. I'm not someone that, look at my locks. I don't try to fit in, okay? Like, I don't care about fitting into society. I care about caring. That's what I really care about. So I don't know if this is, I don't care if it's convenient, what is it, cordial? I don't know what the word is, but we have to care. So there's two words that I discovered that I really loved. One is connotation and denotation. The denotation of a word is the definition. When you look in the dictionary, you'll see a definition of a word, which is fantastic. The connotation of a word, say there's like 100 people in here. The connotation of a word is how you feel when I say that word. So I may say culture, for example, and what's your name, man? Tracy would say one thing, and what's your name? Angela. I'm not going to pin you against each other, but like Tracy may say one thing, and then Angela is going to say another thing, right? Is it good, bad, right, wrong, better, worse? No. It's just a window into their own lived experience and the things that they value. I'm saying that because this is, well, we're all here, right? I don't like workshops where I'm talking about the others, right? Them and the others. That makes me cringe when I think about it. We're here. So we're going to talk about what we can do about cross-cultural communication together. But it's also for the purpose of serving that resident, because if we're practicing valuing our or understanding our relationship with different topics, different words, we're going to be more present when we're with that resident, when we're with the staff, we're going to teach, because it's caught more than taught, we're going to teach the staff how they can communicate with each other. We can be a model, right? So let's look at some words. For example, nationality. It says the status of belonging to a particular nation by origin, birth, or nationalization. Ethnic group. Ethnic group is interesting to me because it says a sizable group of people sharing a common and distinctive racial, national, religious, linguistic, or cultural heritage. I think that's really interesting because I lived in South Korea for some time, and I loved it. I want to go back to South Korea at any point in any time. But one of the things I missed after about 8 months of rice, and I love rice, right? But I had 8 months, though, and I was like, I didn't realize I love cheeseburgers until 8 months. And I was like, man, I miss a cheeseburger. And I met another guy, also from the States, and we were happy to see each other. I was in a small town. We were happy to see each other, and we started talking about cheeseburgers. And guess what? He didn't look like me at all, but we shared the same ethnicity in that nationality part. So an ethnic group isn't necessarily, sometimes we may just think or see like the photos there when we think of ethnic group, but actually ethnic group is way more than that. And it's good to have that perspective when we're having conversations with others or when we're watching the news. It's good to have a level kind of understanding about different things, right? Race, a human population distinguished as a more or less distinct group of genetically transmitted physical characteristics. Maybe most of you agree with that, but there's aspects of race that we only see on, let's say, the media, television, etc. That doesn't mean that that's the only aspects of race that are important, that should be cherished, etc. And these are relationships. We have to look at what is our relationship with these words, right? Because we can't really escape, or we'll try to escape them, right? Everybody looking at their phones right now, they're escaping. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. I'm not looking at you, right? But when we talk about these subjects, some of us I grew up talking about certain topics, right? And it's just normal. Then I meet somebody, their mom and dad never talked about the topic, right? Even the word culture, like, never even gets brought up, right? And you being raised. And some people, they are. What we have to do is when we talk to each other, understand that some people just don't have, I used to think people were racist because they look at me funny if I say the word culture, right? No, it's just their experience with that word. You know, there's broke people that look at you funny when they talk about money, right? It's the same thing, you know? It's just their relationship with the word, with the subject is little, right? And it's actually an opportunity to learn more. So what is culture? I want to call people, brave people, to just say out loud, what is culture? Environment that you grew up in. Yeah. Y'all think that's satisfactory? The flavor. I like that. It's like the flavor around you. That's really nice. That's really nice. Any others? Shared values. I like that. Shared values, yes. What's that?
Lack of flavor, like you live and come from a small town, and you venture out of that small town, and you're like,
Ooh,
all of this, you don't know.
that's really good. She said a lack of flavor. Sometimes if you live in a really small town,
Everybody's the same.
everybody's the same. And here's the interesting part. That lack of flavor is that's just the culture, right? Is it bad? Not really, not necessarily. Yeah. Is it because if it's approached good, bad, right, wrong, better, worse, then that may not give us an opportunity to learn about that particular culture and what are the things that they actually value. I know I'm in North Dakota, so there's a lot of rural areas, and in those rural spaces, there's 500 people, could be a big town, and if I approach them with a sense of their background is bad, right, or their background's just not enough, and they're not going to open up about the things they actually grew up and valued. The things they valued the most as they grew up, they won't share it with me. They're going to be like, okay, let's wait until he gets out of the room so that we can talk to someone else. So that's an important thing, to welcome everybody in because culture is just learned. It's just something we've all learned, culture. And our patients, our residents, the people that we serve have all learned culture. It's learned, where is it learned? It's learned first in family, then in school, then in the community, social organizations, maybe like church if you're in a conservative area like North Dakota. So it's learned. And the good news is it can be unlearned, or we can learn more, right? That's the cool part about culture. Culture doesn't also stay in the box of ethnicity and race. Sometimes when we just think about culture, and I'll bet you $10. No, that's really low. How about $1 trillion? That if the next workshops you go in, it says cross-cultural communication, call me if they talk about anything besides ethnicity and race. All right? I'll give you 50 years, okay? So it's not just that. There's cultures in healthcare. One person's nursing home. Who said they're in a nursing home? Or they work there? What's the name of your nursing home? Mount Notre Dame. I called you twice. I'm going to have to call everybody twice now. Sir, did you say you're in a nursing home? What is it? Heather Downs, okay. So Mount Notre Dame, they got a different culture than Heather Downs, right? Different values. Are the values bad? Because no, right? But it's different. And it's not dependent on race, and it's not dependent on ethnicity. That doesn't mean we dismiss race and ethnicity. It just means this is an aspect that shouldn't be ignored, that we have this culture within. What kind of culture do we want our organization to have? And by the way, if we're intentional like that, then we could be intentional about welcoming people of different backgrounds, race and ethnic groups, if we're intentional of embedding that in the culture of our nursing home, right? That could be a part of the culture. So cultures differ from one another in many ways, right? Like I said, United States, might see ethnicity in one way or another because of what we see on our screens maybe, but culture is learned, right? The reason why this is really, really important to understand and be self-aware is because when we have conversations with anybody, but when we have conversations with staff, the conversations usually start on the surface, right? We talk about music, we use a certain language, may talk about food, maybe clothes, But the reason why we need to be very self-aware, I think is really, it can be really important, is because when we are self-aware, when we're aware of our own emotions, how we're feeling, if we're feeling like, man, I'm really engaged right now, or man, I am, why am I not engaged? Why is this person is talking about KFC? I'm not engaged because I love Chick-fil-A, or something like that, But we're reflecting and thinking about that. If we're doing that a lot, we can help others feel like they're in a safe place to talk about these things that are underneath the surface. Because if I feel uncomfortable when we're starting to talk about being self-aware, if I'm feeling uncomfortable when we're starting to talk about being just really engaging in subjects that I might not be as familiar with, if I am comfortable with that, I'm going to help other people be comfortable about these things that are below the surface, if you can't see it. Values, different values, religious beliefs, attitudes about family, beliefs and about beauty, attitudes towards authority. These kind of things are subjects that a lot of the older adults that we serve, they don't fit in a pretty box, so they don't know who to talk to about different things that they really could be bothering them. And some of these issues underneath the surface may have caused rifts within their family members. And if there's rifts with their family members, there's more isolation and loneliness that can take place. If there's more isolation and loneliness, there's less opportunities for communication and to feel connection and to feel belonging. And so, do you see how this is important? To be self-aware? Be self-aware of how am I communicating? What's my communication? Did you guys think we were going to talk about how I'm communicating with myself? All right. It's important. It's a big deal, right? And it can't be, it could be escaped, but you'll be more susceptible to burnout. Research shows that we're more susceptible to burnout when we're not, because self-awareness is also related to mindfulness, also related to emotional intelligence, right? And so these things are incredibly important, but it's also related to providing a safe place. What do I mean by safe place? How many of you have heard of a safe place before? Just that term. Okay, so this physical building right here is creating a safe place physically, right? Like we're physically safe because of the structure. But who makes an emotional, cultural, and socially safe place? It's people. We do. Every single one of us make that space with whoever we talk to. And if we're not doing that, right? If we're not paying attention to that, we're only teaching other people to not pay attention to it. And healthcare is the worst place to do that. Why? Because those residents in hospitals, et cetera, they're at their most vulnerable place, right? They're at their most vulnerable place emotionally, socially, and culturally. Like maybe they want to be there now, but there's programs called Aging in Place, right? Because that's the goal, right? At the end, but they can't. So since they're in the place they're at, they want to feel at home socially, culturally, and emotionally. Do you guys agree with me on that? So this is why when we're self-aware, when we're communicating really well socially, culturally, and emotionally with ourselves, we can help others do that and provide a safe place to talk about these issues that are causing rifts and social isolation and loneliness. We use our language. We can pay attention to what words people are emphasizing, right, when they talk, because people are selective with and this is not good or bad, it's just people are selective with the words that they use, right? About how's your day going? You could say anything, but you said this, why? And it's not good or bad, it's about what do you care about? What really matters to you? And then how are we interpreting that information? Hopefully we're not interpreting to just agree or disagree, because agreeing and disagreeing is something that I went to public school, so I learned that subjects, you got to agree or disagree. It's good or bad, right or wrong. But in this setting, and especially in healthcare, it's less about who's right, wrong, good, bad, better, worse. It's just about understanding where you're coming from and respecting and honoring that. That's the playing field, actually, that I think that staff need to, because they get burnt out because there's not a place. My wife is a nurse, we talk about this a lot, but there's not a place for them to talk about a lot of things going on, and how each and every one of us can be ambassadors to provide that safe place for someone. So that's cultural self-awareness. And this one is cultural awareness of others. So coming from cultural awareness of others, from self-awareness to cultural awareness of others, first of all, there's diversity within diversity. And so someone that looks, I had to learn this myself, but someone that looks one way doesn't mean they're going to act like Susie over here isn't going to act like Sharon over there just because they look the same. And trust me, I really, before I went to North Dakota, I thought maybe there was maybe one black person in North Dakota, maybe two. And I was absolutely wrong. There's 5 maybe. No, but there's a lot of Norwegian people, a lot of Germanic background, and a lot of people look alike, but everybody has a story that's really different from the other. Oh, and if some of you are wondering, it's not that racist, at least my experience. In North Dakota, it's not bad. I have a theory about that, though, because I think North Dakota's been a very stable place. It's an anomaly. Even real estate-wise, it didn't crash in 2008. I think most of the racism happens with cities where there's a lot of clashing and there's a lot of people, right? I grew up in one, but I think Toledo, I experienced more racism in Toledo, Ohio, and there's more black people there than I did in North Dakota. North Dakota people are kind. Maybe it's the crazy cold weather. If we get to survive through the cold weather, then we better be nice to each other. So, I don't know. But you guys, being in Columbus, might deal with more friction than I do, right? And I'm around a lot of white people all the time. So it's very interesting. So there's a lot of diversity within diversity. How many of you have siblings? Okay. How many of you are exactly like all of your siblings? Okay, I didn't think so, right? Because there's cultural differences within even the family. There's a cultural difference. There's perspectives there that need to be acknowledged and that needs to be honored. I'm not a pretender, okay? It's good to acknowledge those things and to kill some of these assumptions and the unconscious bias. And that's the whole purpose, really, of what we're talking about here, cross-cultural communication. For example, there's a lot of North American assumptions that might not really apply, but there are some values that I think are actually important to address. So for example, I think it is true that in America, the United States, there is a lot of there's a lot of youth valuing. When you go on social media or whatever, a lot of youth valuing going on. I believe, and I'm a strong advocate of the fact that I think that geriatrics should be taught around 3rd grade. And the reason why is because geriatrics is caring for older adults. And the reason why is because, actually I think 5 years old, because I think it's important to introduce aging. And it's important to introduce longevity. Why isn't the subject brought up? I don't think that geriatrics should be introduced at 65 years old. I don't think aging should be introduced at the age of 65. Now you're 65, now we need to figure out how to age well. I think to start around 5 years old or something like that. So there's a lot of youth valuing, but we need to be valuing aging as well. And age, that's the whole point, right? The whole purpose is to age well. All of us. I don't think there's anyone in here, I'm guessing, that that's not your goal, is to age well, right? Together. You can't do it alone. And then the other one there's a lot of important ones here. And some exercises I do is I ask people to turn to each other, and we don't have time, but turn to each other and ask each other about what are the things you feel like you resonate with the North American as opposed to a quote-unquote contrast. The present focus is also a very important one. I think it's true that in the United States there is this future-oriented kind of focus a lot, and I think that's where we come into some issues with FOMO. You guys know what FOMO is? Okay, it's fear of missing out, right? People, we're conditioned to think about this moment not being enough. This isn't enough. I got to see what's going on with my phone. I got to see what's going on with the cousins. I got to see because this present moment, I've been taught and reinforced that this moment right here, being present, isn't enough, and I don't feel comfortable being present right now. If that's an issue, if you find that, please pay attention to it, because it may show up when you're talking to your staff. It may show up when you're talking to a resident. Talking to a resident, you're talking to them in this moment, but you just have a habit of feeling like this present moment isn't enough, that there's something else you need to be going to in the future, right? And we have great marketers in our time that really teach us that, if you don't do this, then this is going to be a bad outcome. So you better buy this. I hate those commercials. I hate that kind of marketing, right? Like 10 steps to doing this, and if you don't do this, please, you can't dictate what my future is going to be, okay? I have the privilege of controlling that, okay? So that's something that I too think is good to interpret. We're still talking about cross-cultural communication. That's an example, by the way, of cross-cultural communication. You're hearing this on the airwaves or seeing this, and you're saying, I'm not going to accept the fact that this present, what I have right now, isn't enough. I am enough, and I have enough. Do you guys agree with that? Because we want our residents to think that and to know that they have enough and they are enough. I told you about Dominic, the guy who shared with me about older adults. He was the chaplain. He said that a resident came to him 2020 March and said, why should I go on? Like, why should I go on, Dominic? What if I die? What if I die? And Dominic said, well, what if I die? And the lady said, well, you're not going to die. You're going to be just fine. He was like, how do you know that? And she said, well, you're too important. And he said, and you're not? And you're not too important? He said, I need to see what it looks like to live and age well. With dignity. I need to see it. I need to see it from you. I would be encouraged if I was to see you doing that, right? And a lot of times I think sometimes we'll dismiss our own value, our own opportunity to provide that opportunity for someone else to understand that they are important, that this present moment is important, and that they matter. So what we're doing is trying to attack all of those isms taking place all at the same time. Because isms are basically trying to structure different groups over another group, right? And no group is excluded, right? I can't just blame white people, for example. I can't just say, and I've been at a lot of workshops, and I've done DEI for about 10 years, right? And I'll talk a little bit about that, trust me, well, I think it'll be good. It'll be good. We shouldn't, I call that hijacking. If I just talk about a certain isms or hierarchy, but I'm referring to a certain group, like for me, I never refer to any group except for the human race. Do you guys agree with that? I want somebody to clap for that, because I think that's important. I think we should advocate for one group primarily, and that's the human race, no matter what your background is. And I understand, like minority groups like myself, I had to work through some things to really get to that point, right? Because some people aren't at that point, right? And so we have to understand that and respect that space and listen to their story. But at the end of the day, it's about that. So I told you I've done diversity and inclusion. here's what I think happened, okay? And let me ask you this question. How many of you know what a life coach is? You're familiar with life coaches, okay? I would ask you if you've had one before. They're awesome. They're awesome. I've had a life coach. Now, the one thing about life coaches is that you'll get one in one place, and they'll be a life coach in a certain way towards you. And you get a life coach somewhere else, and it might be totally different. Their style is completely different. Is it good, bad, right, wrong? Maybe not, but it's very different. And that's what the issue there is that there's not a strong standard of curriculum. There's not a end of credentialing, right, for life coaches. There's some, but it's not super strong. It's the same thing with DEI. So DEI hasn't had a very strong curriculum across the board that keeps everybody accountable to a standard structure of communicating about the subject. Are you following me? And so therefore, there can be different folks that'll speak on it, and they'll speak totally different from someone else that'll speak about it, in a totally different space, right? So unfortunately, the worst of diversity got the most attention. The worst of it got the most attention. It is what it is. And what's important, though, to understand is that we still need to actually behave as though we're including everybody within the space and listening to those that have been really hurt by an initiative that maybe got hijacked, maybe went awry. That's okay. It's not bad, right? I just have to listen and understand that perspective and not ignore it, right? Especially in this climate today. That's not a workshop, that's a life shop. I won't even go there, but y'all know what I'm talking about if you live in this country, right? And it's not good, bad, right, wrong, better. It's hard if we don't communicate with each other. And we're still on the subject of communication here, right? So the problem of diversity matters emerges because we live in a world that encourages people disproportionately to use differences to include, exclude, reward or punish, credit or discredit, elevate or oppress. And you may feel that another group is doing some of that, right? But we don't get anywhere if we don't provide a space for people to listen, to each other. So let's get some example here in healthcare is racial characteristics and how much they vary. So there's actually a 0.012% of human biological variation. And I think that's important to just have in the back burner because when we do communicate with someone that looks different, that has a different cultural background, we still keep on the forefront that it's more important that they have a birthday and I do too. It's more important that they have goals and I do too with their life. It's important that their mom was sick at some point and they cared about their mom and I did too. All right, that's more important. I call those primary identities. The primary identities is like the root, right? And the secondary identities is what we celebrate. It's like the branches, right? But we can't switch those and make them upside down. The root is the root, and that is what really, keeps the tree up, right? The tree of humanity keeps it up. So I've been in workshops where I've had a clinician say that a person of this race is susceptible to XYZ health condition. And I actually asked them if they have had social determined self-training, and they said no. So I was like, okay, I understand. But if that's the case, that this biological variation is as it is, health conditions would therefore be best issued based on one's individual or immediate family history, perhaps, cultural practices, but the biggest one is life choices, life decisions. And that's why we value the stories of our older adults and where they're coming from, what their perspectives are, because that really, unfortunately, they felt like their story didn't belong in healthcare. They came in, and if there was not a certain medication that could be prescribed, that's all that really mattered when they visited their doctor, right? That isn't all that really matters, right? What matters is their life story because it affected their life decisions, which made them either not chase alcohol or chase alcohol, right? and unpacking those things and providing a safe place for those things. Same thing with the staff, by the way. You talked about staff, right? The staff are having these issues, not knowing who they can talk to about it. In African American with XYZ dietary habits and with family histories XYZ may be susceptible to XYZ, but we don't know. Older adults, there's so much of a gap in geriatric training. I did a gap analysis of the medical school and for nursing, social work, et cetera. There's a gap in geriatrics. There may be like 1 week of geriatric training that may take place across the board from California to New York, okay? And that's an issue. And it became so bad that there was something called the age-friendly approach that took place, which I'm going to get to in a second. How many of you have heard of age-friendly? Okay, there's an age-friendly curriculum, and I'm going to show it to you. But cultural incompetence and cultural insensitivity is displayed when health conditions of race are generalized, or we just generalize in general about the cultural perspectives and also the health conditions of someone of a certain background, right? This is the age-friendly approach, right? And there's 4 M's. The reason why it exists in the first place is because of that gap of geriatric training that it just doesn't exist. So these are the 4, they broke it down into 4 categories that are most important to attend to when it comes to an older adult. Mobility. Mobility is, of course, how you get around, but it's mostly about preventing falls, because falls, you guys know, right? Falls, health declines quickly after a fall. Mentation. Mentation's a big deal, but delirium, depression, and dementia, those are the 3 Ds that are focused. Medication is more about delineating the amount of medications. It's not about making sure they have more medications. It's actually delineating the amount and there's a Beers test through which someone can go through, and it shows the kind of medications older adults should absolutely avoid. Let me know if you want that. You can email me and I'll send that to you, because there is a list. And there are older adults taking these medications. 2 days ago, I just heard of one older adult that's taking a medication that's on the list. And I'm like, man, but I'm not surprised. There's a gap in the training of geriatrics. But the reason why this is mostly important and cross-cultural communication is important is because of what matters. What matters? Who can dictate what matters to that older adult? Nobody. Who can dictate what matters to your staff? But nobody. We can ask, and we can value, or we can ignore it. I'm going to zoom through these really quickly. Ignoring, to me, is the same thing as assuming. And by the way, ignoring is a skill. If you're good, you can get real good at ignoring, right? And assuming is a skill too, right? You can get really good at that, right? So let's talk about a couple barriers, right? There's language barriers. We have great apps now. How many of you have not heard of ChatGPT by now? I'm just curious. Dang, I said by now. Now you're probably ashamed to raise your hand. I'm sorry. All right. But anyway, there's an app. It's called ChatGPT. And that's one way of using a tool to translate. But there's many others, and I don't have time to go through them all. And some of you may actually, I know you probably have some too. So the big thing about stereotypes and prejudices, the one thing I'll say about this, the way to avoid stereotypes and prejudices, a kind of mindset, is to focus more on the assumptions and biases. If you can manage those assumptions that you have just in general and biases, that's the first step before the stereotypes and prejudices. You avoid those if you focus on managing the bias and the assumptions. Ethnocentrism is a little different than hierarchical structure of this is better. It's saying my culture is at the center, right? It's everything. And, I've been trained to think about white people, right, when I said that, right? But that's not what I mean, right? My culture means my family, back how I grew up, right? We grew up on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. So if you had salami, you're lesser of a human being, okay? That's what I'm talking about. That's not, I made that up, okay? I made it up. So that's ethnocentrism. We have to check that. How do we check that, right? Cultural misunderstandings. This is big on communication because both are right? Both approaches, but how do we need to communicate to say, okay, what do you prefer with your staff? hey, I hear this is going on. What do you prefer, or how's everything going? Because it's one thing to do a digital survey, but an informal face-to-face survey is real good, right? And it's relative. My mom once said to me, like, you have a nice voice. She said that to me when I was playing guitar one time. Took her like 2 seconds. Then she went to bed, right? But I felt something there. I was encouraged after that. And then I started to play the guitar. I get paid now to play the guitar and sing. And so, all right, I'll have to sing next time. But like, one of the things about that is relative. So just 5 seconds of saying, hey, how's things going, can change. That's cross-cultural communication to me, providing that safe space. Nonverbal communication is a big deal, right? You know, when I taught in school too for some time, and in elementary school we had some kids say, when they yawned, like super loud. I was like, what did you just do, Jimmy? And Jimmy's like, oh, Mr. H, that's just my yawn. That's just the way I yawn. I was like, not in this class. Like, not anymore, right? But some of you might say, oh, Dr. Holloway, that's just my resting bad face, right? That's just my resting bad face. That's just what I have. I just do that. Oh, but you're in healthcare. Not anymore, right? Not anymore. Right? These people, they need a deliberate smile, right? Like, even though you're going through it, like, you just give that deliberate smile because y'all know why, okay? Y'all know why. So, and I talked about assumptions and biases. I'm going to go past this a little bit because I have a timer. You're going to have my slide. Don't worry about it. You're going to have my slide. But I want to get to civility. I got 5 minutes. I got 6 minutes. These are just some extra practices about listening. But the real big thing that I want to touch on is training. If you're an administrator, trainings on these things aren't just about, and I know you already know this, like I'm talking to choir, but like the trainings aren't necessarily about putting another tool up our sleeve. It's about just creating and immersing ourselves in a subject that we don't talk about that often. So let's not leave a workshop thinking, did I learn what was right, wrong, good, bad, better, worse? No. Pat yourself on the back because you immersed yourself in a subject matter that we don't talk about every single day. I mean, I teach on this stuff and I don't talk about it every single day. So we're just immersing ourselves and getting our minds thinking about these things. That's all we're doing. And that's what workshops are all about. So I can really encourage you to get workshops into your settings just for that purpose. Right? And also, these are some resources. It'll be available to you. I want to encourage you to reflect. I want to encourage you to ask yourselves the question, what matters? Because a lot of people haven't been presented with that question. One clinician friend of mine said they asked their patient, what matters to you? And this person was in their upper 80s, early 90s, and said, Dr. So-and-so, no one's ever asked me that before. And I thought that was interesting. No one's ever asked me what matters in your life. And I want to encourage you, I want to ask you, what matters to you? It may be family, it may be your faith, it may be your dog, it may be a lot of things, but no one can dictate that doesn't matter to you. I don't care how close they are. All right, tell your spouse that I said, no, I'm just kidding, but I don't care how close they are, no one can dictate to you what matters to you, right? But it's also our responsibility to train people to listen to and value what matters to us, right? So ask that question, reflect on it, if you do anything. But the whole core of cultural sensitivity is this word called civility. All right? Civility is a big deal. It involves acting with regard to others' lived experiences and feelings. And training ourselves to always do that when we enter into a conversation and when we're not thinking about is he right or do I agree with him? No, am I listening? Am I hearing his lived experiences and his feelings? You're not doing that for me. You're doing that because you're practicing it when you get in front of a patient or another staff member. It's just practicing, that's all. Diversity and inclusivity isn't about, about understanding. It's not about agreeing, okay? And cultural sensitivity, it involves civility, which involves all of these words I see when I see this whole sentence. Communication, interaction, and appreciation. That word is so important. There are dementia patients that a clinician friend of mine saw greater health outcomes because questions that help that person appreciate the condition that they're in. How can we help our staff to appreciate more the condition? How can we help ourselves to appreciate the places that we're in, even currently, right now? These words, to me, are synonymous. Empathy, courtesy, conflict de-escalation, all these things are related to civility and having a sense of civility. Welcome, right? Which is better, when you come to somebody's house and they say, I tolerate you. Come in. I tolerate you. Or, I welcome you. I welcome you. Right? That's a skill. What? Because, well, I don't really like her content. I don't like what she's sharing. No, practice listening. Practice just understanding play a game in your head about why is this important to her? Why is she sharing this? That's a skill, right? And the more we do it, the better we get at cross-cultural communication, right? Without civility, we miss a lot of opportunities, right? So I just want to encourage myself first to be proactive, to be a model, not pass the buck to someone else, because I'm teaching other people to pass the buck. Ask why, have a plan, follow through with the plan, document on these things that that maybe doesn't have anything to do with compliance, but it has everything to do with compliance. It's one of those things that aren't urgent, but extremely important, that's going to become urgent eventually, right? I just want to encourage everybody to journal, and I don't mean writing. It could be just talking to a friend is journaling too, right? It's reflecting. The whole point is reflection, right? Find someone that you can reflect with, or just I do this. I take out my phone and I record audio, just record my own, because I want to share it later with someone. So those are things I do. These are a lot of follow-up trainings that I love and I recommend, but cultural competence, effective communication skills in general, how to redirect conversation. If someone says, look, I think that Biden needs to get back in the office, make America Biden again. I don't know. You know how to redirect a conversation to say, well, it sounds like you really care about leadership. Like, did you ever want to be a mayor? What if you were president? I bet you do a better job. Can you give me a couple of reasons why I think you do a great job? What do you think? Because you're pointing it back to their story. Because that's really it's all about. It's not about agreeing or disagreeing. I know right when I said that, y'all went in the disagree-agree mode. I know. But it's not about that. It's about listening to what they actually care about, right? Because they probably just care about their family and want to make sure their family's in a great environment. This is, if you want more resources, that's a QR code. And I think you're going to have the PowerPoint, so it should be available to you. So you're all good. Just stay there, look pretty. I know it's after like the lunch, so y'all chilling. It's all good, right? But my father is the one that inspired a lot of this. My dad went to university where he graduated from, and he didn't go back as a professor. He came back as a janitor, and he did that for 10 years. And I didn't even recognize it or appreciate it until later. And when I did, I finally said, wow, Dad, thank you so much. And he said that a lot of people ignored him who were professors. And he said, one day I'm going to have a friend that's not going to ignore me who's a professor. And then he looked at me over coffee and said, I never thought that would be my son. And I just said, I cried. I cried. But you know, I could have dismissed because he's from another generation. He grew up differently, blah, blah, blah. But I said, well, what did he do for me? And what did he do that I can appreciate? And it wasn't hard. My dad is great, and my mom is great too. But I did it, and I'm thankful for it. That's a discussion, but I just want to tell you thank you so much. You guys are amazing. You just looked at me all day long. You looked at your phones maybe twice, maybe 5 times. I'm just kidding. It's a joke. I'm just so grateful for you, and I wish you, some of y'all look at me bad, but I'm joking. But I want you to have a wonderful day, and I'm so grateful for you. Let's connect.